In the mid-1960s, India was on a knife's edge. A future of widespread hunger seemed terrifyingly real. Two brutal droughts had crippled the nation, causing food grain production to plummet by 19%. The country was surviving on a humiliating ship-to-mouth existence. Grain ships arriving from the United States were the only thing keeping mass starvation at bay. Some Western analysts, like William and Paul Paddock in their controversial book Famine 1975, were writing India off, arguing that countries like it couldn't be saved and that sending food aid was a waste. But they hadn't counted on one man. A scientist who refused to watch his country starve, who cooked up a radical plan that would either save a billion people or go down as a spectacular failure. His name was M.S. Swaminathan. The crisis of the 1960s wasn't out of the blue, it was the climax of a long struggle. After independence in 1947, partition had left India with a much larger share of the subcontinent's population than its cereal-producing land. Despite the government's ambitions, farming productivity was stuck in low gear while the population was booming. The country was caught in a dangerous cycle: more people, stagnant food production, and a heavy reliance on foreign aid. That aid mostly came from America's Public Law 480 program, or PL 480. Billed as food for peace, it let India import surplus American wheat. But it wasn't free. This constant dependency was a source of national shame and gave the United States significant political leverage during the Cold War. At the height of the crisis, India was importing a staggering 10 million tons of grain a year. These food shipments were all that stood in the way of a repeat of the horrific Bengal famine of 1943, a disaster that killed millions and was burned into the nation's memory. By 1966, things were desperate. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was under immense pressure. The ship-to-mouth reality meant food reserves were dangerously low. If the ships got delayed, people would starve. The droughts were relentless. India's freedom felt hollow as long as it depended on others for its daily bread. The nation wasn't just hungry, it was on its knees. It needed a miracle. The man who answered the call wasn't a politician, but a quiet, determined scientist named Mankombu Sambasivan Swaminathan. Born in Tamil Nadu in 1925, Swaminathan's path was shaped by compassion, not ambition. He had witnessed the horrors of the 1943 Bengal famine firsthand, and the images of starvation pushed him to dedicate his life to agricultural science. Much to his family's disappointment, they hoped he'd be a surgeon like his father. He chose to study agriculture. His mission was simple: make sure no Indian ever had to suffer that way again. His academic journey was impressive. After degrees in India, he earned a PhD in genetics from Cambridge University and did postdoctoral work in the United States. A brilliant career abroad was his for the taking. But in 1954, he made a life-changing choice. He turned down lucrative offers and came home, joining the Indian Agricultural Research Institute in New Delhi. He was convinced India's destiny would be written in its farmlands. At IRI, Swaminathan was a man on a mission. He knew the old ways weren't going to cut it. While others saw only a crisis, Swaminathan saw a scientific challenge. He learned of the groundbreaking work of an American agronomist, Dr. Norman Borlaug, who had developed new dwarf wheat varieties in Mexico. This sparked an idea, a bold, audacious idea, that would put him on a path to change India forever. The weapon that would win this war wasn't a bomb, it was a seed. In the early 1960s, Dr. Norman Borlaug had a major breakthrough in Mexico. Traditional wheat in places like India grew tall and thin. When farmers added fertilizer to get more grain, the plants would get too top-heavy and simply fall over, a problem called lodging. The very thing that was supposed to increase the harvest was destroying it. Borlaug's genius was to breed a new kind of wheat, a semi-dwarf variety. These plants were shorter with thick, sturdy stems. They could handle huge amounts of fertilizer, channeling that extra energy into producing much more grain. It was a complete game changer. Borlaug's work had already turned Mexico from a wheat importer into an exporter. Swaminathan, who had been following this work, knew this was the answer India needed. Through a collaborative effort involving Swaminathan and his colleagues, an invitation was extended to Borlaug, who visited India. They secured several strains of these experimental seeds, including Sonora 64 and Lerma Rojo 64 for testing at the IRI. The first trials looked good, but Swaminathan knew lab tests weren't enough. To convince a skeptical government and a nation of traditional farmers, he had to prove it worked in the real world. He and his team rolled out an ambitious national demonstration program, setting up plots on farms across the country to show what these seeds could do. His goal was to show, without a doubt, that these miracle seeds could deliver incredible harvests, not just in a lab, but in the soil of rural India. Swaminathan's plan hit a wall of skepticism from bureaucrats and wary farmers. But he found a powerful ally in the Minister for Food and Agriculture, C. Subramaniam. Appointed by Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri and backed by Indira Gandhi, Subramaniam was a politician who got it. He shielded Swaminathan from political drama and threw his weight behind the project. To show his own belief, Subramaniam even had the Mexican wheat planted on the lawns of his house in Delhi. With this political cover, the national demonstrations took off. The results were mind-blowing. In demonstration plots, the new dwarf wheat varieties produced yields far greater than traditional strains. A hectare that once produced around 0.8 tons of wheat could now, under the right conditions, yield over 4 tons. The sight of short, sturdy stalks bursting with grain started to win over the doubters. The real test came in 1966. Facing a catastrophic food shortage, Swaminathan and Subramaniam made an incredible gamble. They convinced a nervous government to approve an unprecedented import of 18,000 tons of Lerma Rojo and Sonora 64 seeds from Mexico. It was a massive leap of faith. If these seeds failed on a national scale, it would be a disaster. The seeds were sent mainly to regions with the best irrigation, Punjab, Haryana, and western Uttar Pradesh. Farmers were taught a whole new system, a package of high-yielding seeds, chemical fertilizers, and controlled irrigation. The nation held its breath. When the harvest came in, the results were beyond anyone's wildest dreams. India's wheat production surged. It jumped from around 12 million tons in 1964 to 65 to over 20 million tons by 1969 to 70. For the first time, the fields were overflowing. There were even stories out of Punjab and Haryana of so much surplus grain that schools had to be closed to be used as temporary storage. The gamble had paid off. The Green Revolution had truly begun. The Green Revolution's impact was fast and transformative. By the late 1970s, India, a country once dismissed as a hopeless case, declared it was largely self-sufficient in food grains. The humiliating ship-to-mouth era was over. The flow of American grain ships, once a symbol of dependency, finally stopped. India's total food grain production, which had been stuck for decades, climbed to around 130 million tons by the late 1970s. This was more than just a win for agriculture, it was a restoration of national pride. M.S. Swaminathan showed that India could feed itself. He had given his country the gift of self-reliance and helped shield millions from the starvation that had once seemed unavoidable. He became known as the father of India's Green Revolution, and was awarded the very first World Food Prize in 1987, a prize conceived by Norman Borlaug himself. But Swaminathan knew this revolution had a downside. The heavy use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides led to soil degradation and water pollution. A deep reliance on irrigation was draining groundwater, especially in Punjab. Acknowledging these issues, Swaminathan spent the rest of his life campaigning for an evergreen revolution, a more sustainable way of farming that boosts productivity while protecting the environment for the long haul. Mankombu Sambasivan Swaminathan passed away in 2023 at the age of 98, leaving behind an incredible legacy. He was a man who often said, The future belongs to nations who have grains, not guns. In India's darkest hour, when many had lost hope, his quiet determination and scientific vision turned the tide of history. He armed farmers not with weapons, but with knowledge and seeds, and led a revolution that happened not in the streets, but in the soil. He was the man who helped India win its war against mass starvation. The Green Revolution was a direct response to the devastating famines that came before it. To understand the tragedy that made this revolution so critical, check out our next video on the Bengal famine of 1943. And if you found this story of science and survival compelling, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.